The first sign something was wrong was the blue utility marker sticking out of a brand new flower bed. It should have been standing beside a cast iron valve vault on the edge of my property, but instead, the vault was gone under almost 18 inches of fresh soil, irrigation tubing, sod, and a section of decorative walkway the HOA had installed while I was away for 3 days. The HOA president called it an improvement. 11 days later, the same landscaping was being cut open with a concrete saw, while a water district supervisor stood over the excavation, asking one question nobody from the board could answer. Who authorized you to bury an active isolation valve? That question did more than tear up a flower bed. It stopped the final utility sign-off for the HOA's new $8 million pool and fitness complex, exactly 3 days before the grand opening. My name is Luke Garner. I was 52 then, and I owned a small HVAC service company. I knew enough about utilities to understand that large valves do not get placed beside a water main for decoration. The vault sat on a narrow strip along the west edge of my property, measuring about 30 inches across, covered by a heavy round lid, and marked by a blue fiberglass post carrying the local water district's name. For 16 years, district crews had opened that lid every so often, exercised the valve, checked the stem, and logged the inspection. Then the HOA decided the entire area needed to look better, as their new pool complex was almost finished. The board had spent years planning it. A competition-sized pool, fitness center, cabanas, event terrace, new locker rooms, and upgraded landscaping. And directly beside the entrance sat my ugly utility vault, which was apparently unacceptable. I had already warned HOA President Dana Whitmore twice not to touch it. Dana was 58, tall, polished, and always perfectly dressed, usually in a dark pink business suit that made her look like she had stepped out of a corporate meeting instead of an HOA clubhouse. She told me the valve box was unsightly and probably abandoned, while I reminded her that the water district still inspected it. She said their landscaper would verify everything, but what they actually did was cover it completely. When I came home, I found the marker post tossed behind a hedge, the valve lid completely invisible, and contractors setting pavers directly over one side of the access area. I photographed every inch before I called anyone. The soil, the sod, the pavers, the missing marker, and the irrigation line. Then I opened my security camera app, and what I saw there told me this had not been an accident. My house sat on a parcel that existed long before Brookhaven Estates was developed, and while it was not a farm, it was larger than the surrounding subdivision lots. It was just under 2 acres, with an old brick ranch house, a detached garage, and a strip of mature pecan trees along the back. I bought it 16 years earlier because I wanted something outside the perfectly matched streets, deeper inside the HOA. The subdivision grew around me in phases, and eventually, part of my parcel became subject to limited HOA restrictions, but the deed still showed several older utility easements that predated the community. One of them crossed the west edge of my property, which I had barely noticed at closing. The language gave the regional water district broad rights to install, operate, inspect, maintain, repair, and replace water infrastructure within a defined strip, and the valve vault sat precisely inside that boundary. For years, it caused absolutely no problems. Every spring or fall, a district truck might stop for 20 minutes, so someone could remove the lid, use a valve key, make a note, and then leave. The HOA never maintained it, never paid for it, and never asked me to service it. That changed when the board approved its new recreation complex, a project Dana treated like her personal legacy. The old clubhouse was being expanded into a modern fitness center, and the original pool was replaced with a much larger facility as the total project budget climbed past $8 million. A new pedestrian entrance from the west side would bring residents directly past the edge of my property, where the landscape architect had designed low walls, ornamental grasses, lighting, and a wide decorative walkway. The valve vault sat exactly where the plan wanted a clean sweep of landscaping, prompting my first notice to arrive 6 weeks before the scheduled opening. It called the vault an obsolete exterior utility feature, visible from common areas, but I answered that the equipment belonged to or was controlled by the water district and sat inside a recorded utility easement. Dana responded that the district had newer valves elsewhere and that the old installation interfered with the approved landscape plan. I asked for written confirmation from the utility, but she never sent any, instead having the board fine me $150 for failing to correct the alleged violation. That was when I stopped treating the letters like simple paperwork. If you have ever seen an HOA decide something is abandoned just because it is old or ugly, tell me in the comments what you would have checked first. And share this story with someone dealing with utility or easement issues, because the most important thing I did was refuse to guess about equipment I did not own. A week later, Dana's landscaper arrived, and while I was out of town, they made the problem disappear under dirt. My driveway camera caught the landscaping crew arriving at 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, and Dana showed up 20 minutes later. The footage showed 3 workers standing around the valve vault as one man removed the blue marker post and another photographed the cast iron lid. Then the crew supervisor walked toward Dana with his phone in his hand. They spoke for several minutes, and after that, the excavator started moving soil. That sequence mattered immensely. The crew had seen the valve, they had photographed it, they had paused, and then they covered it anyway. I sent the video clips to the HOA manager and asked that all work stop immediately, but Dana replied before the manager even did. She said the landscape contractor had safely incorporated the old utility feature into the site improvements, a phrase that made absolutely no sense. A buried valve is not safely incorporated into anything, so I immediately called the water district. The customer service representative initially thought I was describing a small residential shutoff, but when I gave her the location and marker number from an older photograph, she transferred me directly to field operations. The supervisor asked whether I could still see the vault lid, whether the marker was still installed, and whether anyone from the district had authorized grading over the valve. I told him no, and he said someone would check the asset records before calling me back 20 minutes later with the final verdict. The valve was active. Not only active, it was a major isolation valve on a looped main serving several streets in Brookhaven Estates and part of the commercial strip south of us. Its purpose was simple. If a main broke in one section, crews could close that valve and isolate the damaged segment without shutting water off to a much larger area. The district supervisor told me not to dig it up myself, emphasizing that they wanted the site preserved until they could inspect it. That same afternoon, the HOA sent me another notice, accusing me of interfering with approved common area landscaping and adding a $300 fine. So now the board had buried water district equipment on my land and was actually fining me for objecting. I called property attorney Sarah Mitchell, who told me to stop communicating directly with Dana. Sarah sent preservation notices to the HOA, the landscape contractor, and the management company, demanding that nobody alter the buried area until the water district completed its inspection. Then she asked me for my deed, a document that quickly became the first layer of the case. The second layer came from the contractor, whose project notes showed a field question entered the exact morning the valve was covered. Existing water valve in proposed landscape zone. Confirm, abandon, or remove. The response came directly from Dana's project email account. Proceed. Old feature no longer required for community use. There was no attachment, no district approval, no engineering note, and absolutely nothing to verify the valve was abandoned. They had simply decided it was. Sarah pulled the recorded utility easement from the county recorder, discovering it was older than Brookhaven Estates. The district had broad rights inside the strip, including unrestricted access to operate and maintain valves and other water infrastructure. The easement also strictly prohibited the property owner from placing permanent obstructions that materially interfered with district access, a restriction I had never violated, but the HOA certainly had. Then I requested the original subdivision utility plans from the county, where the valve was clearly shown on the water main loop with an asset number and isolation designation. The water district sent us inspection records going back years, proving the most recent inspection was only 8 months old. The technician had exercised the valve successfully and marked it operational, completely destroying the abandoned theory. Then Sarah looked at the permit file for the pool and fitness complex, and that was when this stopped being just my personal problem. The new complex required upgraded domestic water service, irrigation, pool makeup water, fire protection connections, and backflow prevention testing. The water district had to provide final acceptance for portions of that infrastructure before the county could complete final occupancy approval. One of the utility review notes required existing district access along the west side main to remain unobstructed, which specifically included the valve on my property. Dana's landscaping project had buried equipment the exact same utility district was scheduled to inspect as part of closing out the new complex. The timing was unbelievable, as the grand opening was less than 2 weeks away. Banners were already hanging at the clubhouse, and residents had received their invitations. The HOA newsletter advertised food trucks, a ribbon cutting, and the first weekend of pool access, while the water district inspector could no longer reach one of its active valves. Then my camera footage gave us the strongest evidence yet. The crew supervisor had not simply noticed the vault. He had opened the lid, leaned over it, and photographed the identification plate inside. The camera did not capture the numbers clearly, but it did capture Dana standing beside him while he examined it. The contractor later produced the photo from his phone, proving the plate contained the water district name and valve asset number. Dana had authorized the fill after that photo existed, so Sarah sent everything to the HOA's attorney and insurer. The fines stopped growing the next day, and while they were not canceled yet, for the first time, Dana stopped emailing me. The water district inspection was scheduled for Friday morning, exactly 3 days before Brookhaven's planned grand opening. The utility crew arrived with a locator, vacuum excavation equipment, and the original system map, led by District Supervisor Mike Alvarez. Dana arrived too, along with the HOA manager, landscape contractor, and association attorney. Mike started by locating the water main electronically, and then his crew measured from 2 known fittings to prove the buried valve was exactly where the old drawing said it was. It was under the new landscape bed and partly beneath the edge of the walkway, so the crew carefully removed soil until the cast iron lid appeared almost 18 inches below the new finished grade. Mike stared at it for several seconds before asking who had approved changing the grade over an active isolation valve. Dana said the landscaping had been county permitted, but Mike asked for water district authorization, which nobody had. That distinction became the entire case, because a county landscape or building permit did not give the HOA permission to obstruct water district infrastructure protected by a separate recorded easement. Mike inspected the valve chamber, noting that soil and irrigation material had entered around the frame. Access clearance was gone. The marker had been removed, and the new pavers would prevent the district from using its normal valve equipment safely. The district issued a corrective notice, demanding the vault be exposed to proper grade, the surrounding area provide working clearance, and the marker be restored. Irrigation had to be moved, and the affected portion of walkway had to be completely redesigned. Then Mike opened another file, noting that Brookhaven's pool complex utility sign-off was scheduled for the following Monday. He explained that final acceptance would not be issued while the association had an unresolved obstruction over active district infrastructure, tied to the same local system. The district was not closing the old clubhouse or condemning the pool. It was simply withholding its final utility approval until the problem was completely corrected. Without that approval, county officials could not finish the occupancy process for the new expansion. Dana had buried one ugly metal lid because she wanted the entrance finished for opening day, but now that same lid stood directly between her and opening day. That was the reversal, not revenge, just standard procedure. The landscaping crew returned that afternoon, but this time, they were working under strict water district supervision. They removed sod, cut back part of the new walkway, relocated irrigation, and excavated the vault to the correct elevation before installing a new adjustable frame and lid assembly. Then they restored clear working space around it, and the blue marker post went back up, not hidden behind shrubs, but completely visible, exactly as the district required. The HOA's insurer sent an adjuster, because Sarah had filed a claim for the unauthorized work performed on my property and the subsequent costs created by the obstruction. The contractor produced Dana's written field authorization, making it significantly harder for the board to push responsibility entirely onto the landscaper. At an emergency board meeting Saturday morning, residents learned the grand opening would be delayed. Dana described the problem as an unexpected utility conflict, but another board member asked whether the contractor had raised the valve issue before covering it. The HOA attorney confirmed that a field question existed, and when the same director asked whether written district approval had ever been obtained, the final answer was no. That changed the room entirely. The pool delay was frustrating, but what angered residents more was discovering that the delay had been completely avoidable. The board voted that morning to suspend Dana's authority to approve construction field changes. Any modification affecting utilities, easements, drainage, or private property now required written review from management and legal counsel. 3 days later, the board removed her as president, leaving her as a temporary director who no longer controlled the project. The district returned after the reconstruction, where Mike opened the vault, fit the valve key, operated the stem, and verified clearance met their strict requirements. The marker location was documented, and then the district completed the remaining utility tests for the pool complex, including the backflow and service inspections. Final utility acceptance was issued, allowing the county to complete its remaining occupancy steps shortly after that. The pool opened 9 days later than planned. It was not a catastrophic shutdown, but the ribbon-cutting Dana had spent months planning happened without her standing at the center of it. The HOA canceled every fine on my account. The board reimbursed my survey, records, and a negotiated portion of my attorney expenses through a final settlement. The landscaping contractor repaired the disturbed edge of my property, and the HOA paid the utility-related corrective costs that were not otherwise covered. The valve vault stayed visible, and so did the blue marker. The board adopted a new rule requiring utility owner approval before any HOA contractor covered, relocated, altered, landscaped over, or obstructed infrastructure located within an easement. Dana finished the year as an ordinary director and did not run again. I never cared about embarrassing her. I cared that the next contractor who walked onto my property would know exactly where the HOA's authority stopped. The funny thing is that the valve still looks ugly, sitting as a round piece of iron in the middle of an otherwise polished landscape. But now every time I drive past it, I remember how much trouble came from confusing appearance with absolute importance. The HOA had an $8 million project, professional plans, contractors, permits, and a strict deadline. The water district had one active valve and one recorded easement, and the expensive project did not make the smaller piece of infrastructure irrelevant. It made checking it much more important. If you were in my position, tell me in the comments what you would have done when you found that valve buried. Share this story with someone dealing with an HOA or utility easement. Save it as a reminder to verify ownership before anyone alters infrastructure on private property. And subscribe for more stories about ordinary homeowners protecting their rights with records, evidence, and the law.